Hello, this is Joanne Wilcox with Methuen here on behalf of the team, the committee, and the community voice that has been working hard over the last few months to imagine what the future of Islander Middle School may be. Um, really excited to be here today to share an update with you on some of the progress that we made from the last time we had a conversation, but also just to rewind to share how we got to where we are and to share the logic that's gone behind the planning so far. To that end, our agenda will cover the co-designing process that we've undertaken, both with IMS and really the community voices that have come to the table, specifying clearly what we've heard, what has driven the project from day one around guiding principles, and what that educational experience will be in the future, and why that itself has really resulted in the project and concept that you're here to see today. Sharing more in depth that vision and concept design, really walking through a project that paints a picture of education and practice on IMS in the future, and then ways in which we can maximize community impact and value through enhancements that are needed but not built into the base at this moment. So beginning with the process that undertook the co-designing, this is really a schedule of work that began back in March and April. We are here really to provide the synthesis of that, which is the grounding for future implementation should the board elect to proceed with a measure. We began by really deeply listening and understanding the existing place that is IMS, both the phase one that was built in 2016 with community support, building a framework around what were the needs, what were the ideal components that needed to be added through this project, working with staff, with students, with community members, and in meeting with the Lakes team, Lakes community, excuse me, to really think through the development options that best aligned with the educational pedagogy that drive efficiency, both operational, et cetera, and then are here to share today that sort of synthesis where we arrived at a place that has broad support from all of those voices. We'll cover this timeline again towards the end, but really here to say that the conceptual design that we've undertaken with you gives you a great framework with which to continue forward, a deep understanding of the best option for building organization and massing that meets all of the goals and educational outcome, as well as maximizing the building operational capacity, the program size, and any potential cost. This work will be essentially the foundation for a potential funding measure that you're in consideration of now, and would give you a place to begin to continue the conversation, but really is a launch pad and sets that groundwork for the design, looking at a potential occupancy and construction move-in fall of 2028. We have had a lot of amazing guides through this process, represented here by our steering committee, our leadership team, and of course the design team. And beyond this, we've had every student at IMS engaged in a variety of different listening conversations. We've had students on our steering committee. We've had community members participating, as well as conversations, as I mentioned, with neighborhoods, specifically the Lakes. And so that work is really represented through a series of steering committee meetings where we co-designing this project was really a hands-on process with the committee, where our educators, our parents, our students came together to begin by visioning, talk about educational impacts, working through prioritization and the criteria, evaluating all the different options that we're coming up with to respond to those needs, and then a confirmation that we were on the right track with the option that you're here to see today. That group really led the work. They were incredible in their ability to really bring best practice teaching, to deeply help us understand the IMS pedagogy and where learning would like to go in the future, what they need in order to support all of the students and be able to push best practice forward. What came out of that is really a culture around collaboration that would become interdisciplinary, would allow the staff and student to really create deep connections and are a really viably connected community, both educationally and physically. We moved into a series of exercises that actually put those aspects into physical form, and we're building blocks and models that represented the program elements, classrooms, labs, places for art, places for making, and really working with the student vision and the staff vision around the ideal configuration of those. As we know, each individual teaching space is elevated when it's in adjacency and organization with others that allow it to be more than just the sum of its parts. That work also broke down into very specific educational outcomes where we were working with more hypotheticals when we were thinking about what resources and materials both staff and students need to have available for them to really push learning to the highest caliber. And that work then went out to the students to think about what is their campus experience now. The student and staff participated in several day-long activities where we really had an opportunity to reach every student who wanted to participate and have a voice in the process, including community outreach at a variety of IMS community events. And most recently, making sure that we spoke to the neighbors, the neighborhood, specifically the Lakes HOA. Covering this section about what we heard, really the takeaway from that. What you're going to see really are our guiding principles. The goal overriding all of the others is this is a completion of the vision that the community began in 2014 with the 2016 edition on the IMS campus. Unifying IMS is really about creating one building and one home, creating parity and educational adequacy so that each student and community member feels as though they are within one school community. Currently, what we heard that this goal was really grounded in the fact that our students and our staff can sometimes go a long period of time without seeing or interacting with one another because they're so isolated within the three separate buildings. The core guiding principle around an amazing in the middle experience is that this space should be specifically tuned to the needs of the middle school age on Mercer Island, and that is not a place that's in between, but really it is an amazing opportunity for the years that are spent on campus to really be the launch pad for both the culmination of the elementary experience as well as then where they're headed in tying curriculum to the high school as well. Interconnected campus, there is a lot of tension that happens. It is a large campus. A lot of students and staff are moving very quickly through small portals. The interconnected nature of the campus is the idea that everyone can move fluidly, that stress levels can come down, that the anxiety can come down just in that movement phase, and that it feels as though everyone can move to where they need to go in the time frame, and that stress really is lowered. Supporting the whole student is an educational as well as a social emotional well-being component, that making sure that we were thinking through the planning for a variety of different needs when we're thinking about distribution of spaces, about the configuration of the space, about daylighting, et cetera, that really we're thinking about the experience of the student at the center. Innovation everywhere came from this idea that there are emerging programs that are both here and will come in the future. And not necessarily around the word innovation, but really that learning can happen everywhere, that multidisciplinary learning can happen everywhere, and that there's opportunity for the teachers and the students to really explore where education would want to go in the future. And so that really comes down to agility, flexibility, and this last guiding principle where every space is multi-use, that it has the ability to be thought of in a variety of different lifetimes when we think about what's being taught in those spaces and how those spaces come together, and that no space in the building is really a single use opportunity. These guiding principles then really formed the goal around the conversation around educational experience. And so this is from the staff, student, and parent experience on the steering committee. Really what's been guiding and grounding the work is that the project should be enforcing and kind of reinforcing collaboration, that it should be building a collaborative culture, that collaboration really is an opportunity that isn't a place that says you collaborate here, but it really is a feeling that the building gives you the ability to collaborate, that collaboration is easy. That also ties to the idea that spaces should be hands-on, a variety of different scales, resources, curriculum, materials, sinks, power, the ability to do art, creative making, thinking both individually and as groups really does need to happen in a pervasive way throughout the facility and the school. And specific spaces that will allow the program to really push the direction, whether it's aeronautics or robotics or arts or recording, digital media, that really these hands-on ability for students to engage with learning in real life problem-solving ways and having the resources and the ability to do that within the spaces and places that are part of the program. Those components all came together really again around this organizing elements. There were also some pieces that fall within that we want to make sure we call special attention to. One is that student and staff centered environment has been crucial in the conversation, and that really is driven the design and where we are to date with the concept for IMS phase two. Increasing secure outdoor student space. What comes along with having a campus organization or three separate buildings is we have students and staff that are moving between those buildings during break times and other time outside. The current configuration on the campus does not have an ability to secure that outdoor student space, and that was a large driver about where we arrived in the concept design, is to just increase the ability for students to be outdoors in a very secure, passively supervised manner, so that it doesn't feel as though they're within a fenced yard, but they are outside in a secure space. Mentioned already the efficient circulation and passive supervision. This comes down to how the building and the campus itself is all connected, as well as those arrival moments and departure moments, and making the vehicle transportation, the pedestrian transportation, all as efficient as possible. Consolidating for cost operational efficiency is about tying to the existing systems that were set up for expansion in the 2016 phase, so that tying to those systems allow us to really reduce the cost as much as possible. And then, of course, we have a student body that will and staff body that will be on campus during construction, and so a high degree of consideration has been given to efficient and safe construction logistics. All of this work that we've kind of talked about to date really came through a series of diagrams that set the framework for the options that were considered. Before we move into this, what I'll say is that um, those grounding components really were taken into a variety of different models for exploration. The design team brought forward multiple options for consideration through the conversation of co-designing. Really, the committee, the steering committee, the staff, the students that we had in conversation with us really began to hone in on one or two then that really best aligned with the educational pedagogy. And then from there, the one that they felt really aligned the best. That one of all of the options also happened to pencil out as the least cost, most cost effective, and so the stars were aligning there as well. So from here on out, what we'll go through is really the logic of the option and the concept that the board has for consideration out of the work that we've done to date with the staff and students. So first, before we dive into where we landed, we'll talk a little about construction phasing. This diagram is showing your existing campus for orientation. 84th Avenue Southeast is along the bottom of the page. We have north is to our right, and we'll keep this orientation as we move forward. What you see in phase one is really that 2016 edition that currently houses the entry, academic spaces, gymnasium, commons, and library. This diagram is really showing during construction, the construction zone would be contained within the blue dashed line. We have been working through with the city and our structural engineers and consultants. We have a surety that we can demolish a half of the building that is there, namely the 100 building. They were originally two separate structures that have been joined over time. We are able to remove the 100 building and not need to add a sea of portables in order to meet the capacity during construction. So during construction, the 200, 300, and phase one components would be operational, leaving all the systems that serve the 200 and 300 building intact. And then what you can see here are the access points for our pedestrians and our staff that get us to our drop off and our bus pickup outside of that construction zone. From there, one of the key components has been multiple paths of movement. The school has experienced congestion and struggles with the idea of having one long linear corridor where all of our students are moving down, and the kind of conflicts that can arise through that situation. And so this unifying community under one roof has really become within our construction area. Can we create loops? Can we create multiple opportunities for circulation? And so the form that was originally planned to continue to extend to the north, we're tapping into all those systems that were there. We're then folding the building back on itself to create multiple ways in which we can connect to the 2016 building. And by doing that, we really then create a student and staff centered campus environment where those spaces are both wrapped with the teaching spaces, and kind of the arms of the building wrap around both an interior and an exterior student and staff centered space. In order to activate that, one of them is exterior, one of them is interior. We're carefully locating key community spaces along those courtyards to drive movement through both internally and externally. And so you'll see that idea as we move forward in the design. And then in addition, to improve both direct connection between the main office administrators, relationships with staff, relationship with student, and being sort of central and core to the new entrance, administration and main office then is relocated, both to have the centrality and be right in the middle, right at the heart of the school, but to also have amazing opportunities really for secure visibility of both the entry experience, in this case, 180 degrees, everything from the parent drop off to the bus parking, as well as then internally to the interior and exterior courtyard at the center and heart of the school. This is a mapping of a student. Imagine a student might have classes in each of the blocks that are represented in your existing campus to date. Perhaps that day they're moving from the 2016 building into the 100 building. They have a class in the 300 building and then heading over to the 200 building. One of the things that we heard about the existing campus is the amount of time and conflict that happens both in the transition, at those moments of congestion, as well as just the stress for staff and students to get where they need to be in the amount of time that they have to get there. And so the design options that really floated to the top through this process of co-designing all brought all the teaching spaces into a synergistic center where having adjacency between all the teaching and learning spaces, both of the next phase of the project, as well as then tying back to those teaching spaces that were constructed as part of phase one, allowing for a quicker movement, but also intentional movement, intentionally designing those transition spaces was a really critical component about where we landed in the concept design. And equally so, really thinking about the library as a place of the heart of education, having it adjacent to as many teaching spaces as possible, and having it be, rather than a destination, a place in which you're able to get to easily access. Teachers and staff can use the resources that are in the library very quickly. And so that really has come to a place where we have an ability to repurpose the existing library into classroom space that allows us to drop the amount of new construction that we're building and bring that learning commons into the fold of the teaching, a majority of the teaching and learning spaces. And so you'll see that within the concept vision that we're moving into next. The vision and concept design, again, that really rose to the top. It rose to the top not only because it was the least cost, as I mentioned before, but also because it was the right educational environment for IMS, for the vision of Islander, and where educational philosophy really wants to move forward. One IMS, then I'll spend a little bit of time about the kind of grounding of the concept. What you see in the light gray is phase one. That was the component of the project that was finished in 2016, or phase one, as we've been referring to it within this presentation. The darker gray area that you see is the scope of work that would be proposed to complete IMS as part of this project. One of the core components is really tying the existing dining and common space together that leads out into the fields, into the track, and really connects with those broader community spaces on the left-hand side of your image, through an exterior, safe, held courtyard that is centered in the school, to a similarly open collaborative environment that we're calling the Learning Commons, with teaching spaces in those gray bars that flank each side of that Learning Commons. The entry then is right in the middle. We're able to tie to all of the existing phase one and really create a core entrance location that is midpoint of the campus. And coming back to the spaces that are gray, that are facing the commons entry, we'll go into and dive into what those components are. But that there really is this string of core spaces that are collaborative, open, social community development spaces that go end to end within Islander, from the dining commons through the social commons, the exterior space, and into an interior collaboration environment supporting the teaching spaces that's termed the learning commons. That then has become actualized by working through a program that we'll share with you, mostly of labs, studios, classrooms, the learning commons or library, drama, spaces for art, really direct instruction spaces that we're adding a significant number of instruction spaces as part of this project. There are 18 classrooms, 10 labs, an open STEAM studio, art space, drama choir, rehearsal space, and administration. What you're seeing here is really level one, or the entry level. You can see it on top of the existing parent drop-off, which is off of 84th Avenue Southeast, and you see the existing bus drop-off to remain. The entry point is central to both of those, with the new main office located there, coming into the heart of the school, and we'll dive into depth in just a minute, but wanted to orient you to those components. Before we move on, this graphic does represent in blue the scope of work that is represented in the program, that we really tried to create a very efficient base program to meet the needs. There were needs that we'll talk about as enhancements. We really wanted to communicate those to you at the board level as options for you to understand the cost for each of them. And one of them is highlighted here, so I'll just introduce it, but we'll come back to the notion of this as we move on. And that is a multi-purpose black box space. You can see it in between the drama choir and administration blue blocks, really sort of closing the building and completing the building form right there at the front entrance, what we'll talk a little bit about, but that is one of our enhancements that we'll come back to. I just wanted to call attention to it here. That entry plaza entering through the new administration, and then up into the second floor where the classrooms on your left-hand side of your screen with very light modification. The existing structure and pieces are there for us to do a light modification and transform the existing library into 4 classrooms, really supporting the classroom spaces that are in phase one on the second floor, as well as then on the second floor of this phase would be additional classroom space, art space, science space, and a variety of collaboration spaces as well. We're going to move through how that might begin to feel and support a community environment. We're at the entrance where we're kind of talking about that experience of entering at the heart. The orange square as we move will really highlight the space that we're talking about. So in this case, we're really talking about that entry experience when you come into the building. You'll be greeted by a place that not only connects to the existing 2016 building, it connects to the exterior courtyard. It's filled with light. It brings a sense of welcoming and warmth. It also connects directly to that learning commons. You can see in the bottom image on the left, an inspirational image that the community gravitated towards, which was really a space of learning that's right at the front door that becomes the vertical connection as well as the direct indoor-outdoor connection. Where the existing main office is planned to become the counseling and family services. No modification is really needed in that space to make that happen. And so those spaces will move in really fluidly without renovation, and they're there to support as well student life as well as being immediately available for students and connected. That entry experience then moves into this connected core. This was that concept diagram, if you remember, the kind of pink with the 2 pink ends that we originally talked about. The left-hand side is your existing dining commons, opening that out to the courtyard, creating increased connectivity from the existing dining space and really connecting that to the social courtyard in the middle of the school, allowing students to choose to eat outside, to spend time outside during their lunch break, etc. Connecting all the way across to the central core of the proposal, which is this really connected learning space. Deeply supporting collaboration, classroom access, teaching and learning resources, and that spirit of multidisciplinary learning. This connected core is then really broken down into a variety of scales and spaces with appurtenances. Very similar to the image in the middle on your left is the existing collaboration space that was completed in the 2016 IMS edition, taking the spirit of that place and really moving it into the next phase, learning from that space, and also thinking about how to create opportunities for small group learning or individualized learning that don't necessarily have um, uh, some of the conflicts that come with scheduling. So in the bottom image on the left, the committee was really gravitating towards creating smaller places within larger places where students can feel like they can focus and concentrate, but they don't necessarily have to be isolated in separate rooms. To then on the upper image, really directly connecting all of the classrooms and science labs and STEM studios that are surrounding this space, being able to open doors, open walls, and really flow out into this collaborative immersion space in the Learning Commons zone. This extends up to the second floor. So we've gone now from the level 1, we're now in the level 2. So that idea of collaborative and collaborative immersion moves up to the second floor, light filled, creating opportunities for all of the educators and students on both levels that have parity and access to opportunities. This is also the space in which we're moving. And so the variety and option of being able to move in multiple pathways and not having a single corridor has been something that the steering committee has been very interested in. Students can most easily and fluidly navigate multiple staircases and opportunities to move through space differently in order to, if there's a group of kids hanging out in a space, it's easy to move around them without having to necessarily move them or go through them. This collaborative immersion space then provides opportunity for us to really embed the idea of technology resources, science labs, specific resources immediately adjacent. So on both levels, having opportunities for science, for STEM, for art, for making, for hands-on, to have direct access both to each other for collaboration and efficiency around materials resources, but also then the ability for any discipline, for example, to use a space. For example, in the image on the right, you see a STEAM studio. It would have resources available for every discipline to be able to use as an open resource to create real world problem solving as part of their curriculum. This idea of really having resource-rich spaces distributed throughout then extends to the exterior, very carefully thinking about how materials are arriving to support education. If we're doing large-scale projects, small-scale projects, the ability to step outside in a secure way, have direct access, but also in a very strategic, planned way, and to be able to extend the space, very, very similar to the way in which Northwood extends the learning space out of the art lab, in this case, really having an opportunity to have a sheltered space that is within the secure perimeter, where that learning commons and the teaching and science can have direct access to the exterior, and in this case, the water treatment. I was about to say wetlands. It's not classified wetlands, but the water treatment, rain gardens, and such that are to the west of the project. Coming back into that learning commons, it also is a place where the library would be located, that resource-rich curriculum. A lot of the staff talked about the adjacency, that they would love to have quick access both for students and themselves to the resources that are in the library. And so that's folding the library program into the learning commons. And then as we move upstairs, just really touching on another really central component to the program, which is the business center, whether it's upstairs or downstairs, having it as a part of that central core, supported by lab spaces that are distributed on both level. And again, you can see imagery on the left. These are images that the steering committee and that the community that we worked with through the process really gravitated towards as they describe the types of spaces that would really benefit the students of IMS. Coming back then to the sort of front door experience, one of the programmatic components is around drama. A purpose-built drama space for rehearsal, both for choir and drama. The base is to locate that space immediately adjacent to the existing commons. It's right at the entry component. It would support both rehearsal as well as informal performance. It's attached directly to the commons so that students can both, if you have a drama soliloquy program where you have multiple small groups, those drama students can use the commons. So again, the commons itself becomes multi-purpose in this configuration. But also then if you have a larger event, say a music festival or event happening on campus, it becomes an alternative or a small scale performance venue. And in this case, it is supporting the education on a day-to-day basis for drama rehearsal and choir rehearsal at that front door. Immediately adjacent to it, you'll see in this diagram, again, we've zoomed back out. We're now looking at an aerial map as well as some of the courtyard and the kind of sense of arrival and landscape that would come as part of the project. That drama choir space that we were just talking about is the blue box as closest to the commons. Coming back to what is labeled here black box, but is really a vital component of the program that's been identified. We do have it currently as an enhancement above the base, which so we can identify the cost for your benefit. But that space is really then would allow the performance space to tie directly back to the drama and choir. It gives opportunity for there to be back of house. It's also immediately adjacent to the front door. It is easily accessible by the community and would then complete the enclosure of the courtyard. In the base, the courtyard is enclosed by a beautiful, secure art fence that would allow movement through that space. But the black box itself would be the piece that completes the project. And we'll discuss that in a little more detail as we move forward. But this could give you a good sense of the type of exterior spaces, how the arrival sequence, both from the bus and the existing parking drop-off, have been designed to work with the new front entrance, location of the site, and how it ties to the existing infrastructure. And then the white dashed line is the extent of work. Of course, part of the project is also to remove the remaining aging facilities then once this building is complete and occupiable. They would be demolished. Part of our work has been to really not only think about the organizational framework, how teaching and learning happens within the space, how community comes together, how all of those components work, but also then to think about it in 3 dimensions. One of the primary goals also of one IMS is that it doesn't look like a phase that was completed in 2016 and a phase that is completed now. It really looks like one holistic vision. And so the next slide is really thinking through some of the massing, really playing with the roof forms as that have come as part of the 2016 edition, bringing those over, bringing the materials over, bringing the kind of sensibility of movement. You can see it slid a little further from the lake's property and kind of extends the boundary there, really presents a nice welcoming entrance and holistically ties the 2016 addition together to kind of complete the vision of the school. There is a lot of design work yet to be done, but this should form the grounding and the framework for that design work to take place. So for example, what exact materials, the patterning of the windows, the shape of the roof, all of that are decisions that are going to be coming in the next phase should the board elect to put a proposal to the community for vote. But this gives you a really good sense of, based on all of the work done to date, the kind of a spirit of the place that would emerge in 3 dimensions as it moves forward. Project scope, just to make sure that we are rounding back to exactly what this project contains and entails. It is being designed for a planned capacity of 1,000 students. And that the program, as we worked through it with the staff, is really to complete the IMS program, to think about future and to finish the campus. So what you see here is how we began to identify the need. This was done early on to really think about the educational programs, the types and quantity of spaces that are needed to support those thousand students and their educators both now and into the future. What you see on the left-hand side, where it says existing phase 1, that is the scope of the project that was completed in that 2016 edition. And so you can see, for example, in the large pink areas, physical education, the commons, for example, were all completed in that 2016 edition with some academic spaces. What you see in the phase 2 proposed is the program that we're working with now to complete that and round it out. It is primarily teaching spaces, spaces for special education, spaces across all disciplines, supporting STEM, and in this case, STEM is also science. So all of those lighter blue blocks are our science labs, in addition to program growth opportunities for the future of aviation and other programs that are emerging at IMS, supporting the arts. In this case specifically, that drama choir rehearsal space in our purple shape, as well as then kind of using the learning commons and administration in the way that we've described. So ultimately, this program, when it comes together, maximizes the efficiency of spaces that meet most of the needs of the community. There were needs that were identified that, for example, let me pause to say that when we're saying meets the needs of the community, it's also in reflection to what your neighbors might be building in comparison to districts around us, that these are the types, number, and quantity of spaces to support the program as at its kind of core. Through the conversation, there have been needs that have emerged that are beyond this. And what we wanted to do is make sure that we presented to you the most efficient path forward, and then also gave you the opportunity to consider those enhancements, as is the term that we're using, that really are the spaces and places that would be needed in order to satisfy the needs of your community that might be different from your neighbors, for example, or specific to the Mercer Island community, as separately as we possibly could so that you could understand the implication both from a cost and a timing perspective and weigh those options yourself. Moving now into that area where we're talking about then the enhancements. And we have done a lot of work. The list was quite long. We've done a lot of work with the community to really prioritize the program enhancements that have the highest potential, both value as well as payback operationally within education, et cetera. And so what we're gonna do now is walk through each of these individually. We'll show you what's in the base to be very clear about that. We'll also talk about what the potential project enhancement might be. We have then further worked with the community, with the students, with the staff, and the voices that came to the table to really identify out of this list the needs that they felt would be the highest order should the board elect to add any of these enhancements to the project base. If that makes sense, we've broken them into areas of program, systems, site, and sustainability for further clarity. Specifically around the program, we'll touch on the multi-purpose space that has been labeled black box in a few of the drawings. It has a variety of different names, this multi-purpose assembly performance space that also can support professional development, both school-wide and district-wide, staff community meetings, et cetera. And I think that one of the conversations that the community of educators would love for you to hear is that the value of that is in its ability to be multi-purpose and to be programmed on a daily basis. Additional performing art storage, which is really a series of steps and movements to help support the musical arts as well as the performing arts, but specifically music storage to free up some of the performance and rehearsal ensemble spaces that are currently being used for storage. In systems, we'll discuss cooling capacity, and it says in all classrooms, but specifically existing. Site, track and field replacement, and traffic and parking improvements, and then some components that are in addition to sustainability measures that we are already implementing as part of this project. Starting off with program, I want to orient you first to the base. So this is the base for drama and choir rehearsal. Again, describing the space that's immediately adjacent to the commons. It is primarily a day-to-day rehearsal space that is shared by choir and drama. It also has the ability to be sort of cleared out. It's a flat floor space and an informal performance venue similar to those that you see below. It has storage for the props and risers that would be needed to do that, and it has some AV and light setup, but not full theater setup. Moving from the base into then the enhancement would be the infill of the space that you see that we've talked about a few times. This would be a informal performance venue, meaning a black box, not a raked theater space. That would allow it to have an amazing multi-purpose component and used on a daily basis. Speaking from experience, these are some of the more highly desirable use spaces on campuses where black boxes are available to educational communities, supporting everything from the English department to the math department to, of course, the drama and music department. And so when we think about multi-purpose, we think about having the ability to separate performance and meeting space. We can have rehearsal that stays intact. So if we have users that are both from the middle school community, from the high school community, or other schools on island or in the community, The drama and choir rehearsal can continue, and this space is available for that use. It expands the storage, performance space, and features that back of house component that make it desirable for users, both of the district and potential renters, and then expands the venue capacity. This option for enhancement looks at about 150 seats. There is an option to increase that to 200 seat black box, which you can see there. But what we want to say is that when we separated this out, it does also tie to some systems and infrastructure needs. And so the dollar add for this would be $7.5 million in 2024 dollars. There is a second option when we talk about this multi-purpose assembly space, again, bringing you back to our base. Our base this is the second floor plan showing the reconfiguration. The walls in red would be added to subdivide the existing library into the classrooms. That's the minor modification that's needed. So this repurposing allows 4 classrooms then to be as part of that space and shifts the library into learning commons in the next phase. There is a potential to do no work within this space and leave the existing library space as an open, flexible assembly space. This would be a professional development oriented, less geared towards performance or black box because of the height restrictions and others that are there. There could be an amazing district-wide amenity resource for professional development. It is adjacent to the commons, and so administrators at IMS have also talked about the benefit of it really supporting quiet dining for students that need a little bit of a quieter environment to eat in, etc. While we would do no work then in the existing building, what it does do is moves those 4 classrooms into the new construction. And so this would actually end up being a cost add, less than the 7.5 at $4 million 2024 dollars. Again, not geared towards as far into a performance space as the other. And we'll talk a little bit about it, but the community was very clear that the option 1 of these 2 was their preference. And we'll talk more about that in just a minute. Second option for enhancement is performing arts storage. What you're looking at right here is the lower floor plan showing the existing main office and counseling. This is the space that would become the counseling and family and support services zone. Immediately page north, you see the entrance to the music wing. There are 3 rehearsal spaces, storage, as well as ensemble rooms for breakout practice that are accessed down that corridor. What we know is that the music program is just bursting at the seams. It is thriving. It is growing. Choir then has an opportunity to relocate out of this space as they already have in the new proposal, which would give band and orchestra and others an ability to expand into that space. But it doesn't currently in the base. There's no additional music storage. There's no renovation scope, etc. There could be an opportunity to really reconfigure some space on the lower floor. Again, this was the area originally that we're planning not to do any reconfiguration. That's easily accessible to the music department to enhance the music storage, again, allowing for storage to move out of some of the spaces that are currently taking practice spaces and identify music storage so that those can become ensemble spaces. This does increase the building addition because this program area is slated for other programs by about 500 square feet. And so there would be a $500,000 add to the project in order to provide the enhancement of additional performing arts storage. And this is in addition to the performing arts storage that is provided as part of the base within the drama or choir rehearsal. This is specific perhaps to music and to allow those pieces to work in concert. So we're moving now into the systems, partial cooling in all classrooms. This enhancement is really to update the existing HVAC that was completed in phase 1 to better maintain temperatures less than 80 degrees. As everyone knows, the days in which our extreme temperatures are increasing are only increasing. And so this option is to really go back in to do the work to make sure that we can maintain those temperatures to less than 80 degrees and to increase air circulation with ceiling fans and other components. This enhancement would be somewhere between $3 and $5 million. There are a lot of decisions that we have ahead of us in really making sure that dollar amount is correct. So we're presenting a range here for this option. We did study a full cooling capacity of all of the existing classrooms, and that price tag was, you can see on Board was a lot higher at 15 million. So in conversation with the education community, really this was prioritized as partial cooling that would allow them to maintain temperatures less than 80 degrees. But there is that other option there for the board. Site. Site has a variety of different components. And again, the full site component is addressed within the base. There are some places in which enhancements could come forward. The track and field are coming to a time in which they need to be renovated, revived. That will be a cost that the district will bear in the future. This is looking at what would it cost to do a track and field replacement as part of this project in 2024 dollars. Part of the work would also then widen the track, and we are tightly constrained. And so we do know that we can widen the track to 8 lanes, but that work would cause reconfiguration of the track in the field. And that you can see the price tag there of about $5 million to do that work in 2024. Again, the conversation is whether or not that work gets folded into this particular phase of work on the IMS campus. And then going to parking and a couple of different configurations. We did take a look at what it would take to essentially pave the existing informal parking that already happens along 84th Avenue. This would not be in order to add additional parking, but it would be in order to make the parking that's happening informally along 84th both safe with sidewalks and striping and other components. There would be no parking signs on the east side of the street, and it would essentially level and pave the ditch that's there along that west side to create permanent event parking. Folks are already parking there, so again, it isn't to increase the parking, but it is to make it safer for community and larger events that are happening on the South Mercer playfields, as well as at IMS and other facilities for the district. The price tag for this work is about $1 million in 2024. We're going to go into a little bit more of an enhancement that could be a potential on the IMS site itself. What you're looking at here is actually it's existing. And so you can see all of the components. The red line is the queue of parents and the drop off that happens, and then the distance between that queue and the front door. So in our base, as you can see, that queue remains very similar. The distance from the queue to the front door remains very similar. And so the existing parking lot as it is, completes the functionality of IMS with the reconfiguration. However, there is an option to think about the space remaining on campus. Is there an opportunity to elongate and further separate the parent drive from the staff parking? Some of the issues might be that parents might be shortcutting, dropping their student off in the staff parking, and then those students are moving across the drop-off lane, which is an unsafe condition. This would fully separate that drop-off loop from the staff parking. It has the potential to add additional parking on site as well. It also creates the length of that loop is elongated so that we have more off-street queuing, and we get our cars and drivers and students to a closer adjacency to the future front door. So this option altogether includes the elongation of the driving, the additional parking. It also does drive some site infrastructure development for stormwater, et cetera. And so you can see the $8.5 million that it would take to enhance the parking and drop off in this way, and again in 2024 dollars. Sustainability. Before we dive into the options for enhancement, we want to talk about what is our baseline. We are building an incredibly energy efficient building that goes to all of our systems. It goes to our envelope. It goes to the material choices, the insulation, all those components to really drive down the operation cost of the building. In addition, we are developing stormwater infrastructure that protects downstream waterways, both enhancing the existing system as well as providing for all of the new infrastructure and construction. We are providing the infrastructure for expanding the solar panels and expanding EV charging and creating a healthy indoor environment focused. I know last time we were here, we had a conversation around daylighting, really focused on the glazing quality, the daylighting, the location of the glazing, the orientation of the glazing, filtering that ventilation air that comes through and creating an environment that is constructed from non-toxic materials. This is just a summary of some of the ways in which we've addressed sustainability in the baseline, not the full list, but really the high level summary of the components that are included. What we want to talk about now are some very specific enhancements that we would like to put forward for your consideration. One of the components that came up around the courtyard is the opportunity for students to really use it in a way that doesn't require being told no, and also allows for your operations and maintenance team to have the lowest possible work. And so what you see on the left is an image that the committee, students, and staff have gravitated towards. Although these are adults doing very corporate things in the image, you can imagine if the courtyard could be a space where trees can thrive, where kids can move wherever they would like, where they can group and clump and cluster and socialize in a way that doesn't have a wide variety of planting beds that they need to stay out of, that needs to be maintained, for example, that would be ideal. Technology to allow that to happen is available. They're called storm cells. And so this is where we actually get to build an infrastructure below the trees that is underneath what is porous or pervious paving. It becomes a part of our stormwater system. So we get to decrease some of those other infrastructure components if we integrate storm cells. It lowers courtyard maintenance. It allows, we don't need a lot of area where we have planting beds that need to be maintained. Students need to stay out of it. And it provides for healthier trees and soils and faster growing trees. The storm cells for the courtyard space that's planned would be about a $500,000 add in 2024 dollars. Additional components around sustainability, again, these are the very clear enhancements that we wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to discuss and dialogue on, would include lowering the building carbon from a structural perspective. What you see on the left is a seal structure. There are a lot of wood elements and components at IMS that give it the warmth and the sensibility of a very wood-rich environment. What you see on the right would be an opportunity to really think about a mass timber, which is a lower bodied carbon structural system than steel, to bring similar components, warmth of wood, and be the structural system on display. Benefits with regard to carbon, of course, which is really the sustainable component, but also from a student and staff-centered perspective, it offers you the opportunity to create a warm biophilic environment through a material. We did do a quick analysis and are estimating that including other components, about $3.5 million would be the investment in order to add a mass timber structure as a component for the next phase. And then this is about adding additional PV panels themselves. In the base is the infrastructure to add additional panels. We're also shaping and forming the roof of the next phase in order to best orient them for solar panel usage. This would be to actually go in and add the panels themselves to the project. The proposal here, or the cost that is represented here, would be to double the existing capacity of the solar array. And again, very clearly, the infrastructure to do that in the future is part of the base. This is really the installation of the panels themselves as a part of the project. And the cost to do that work is about $750,000 in 2024. Knowing that all of that adds up to an amount that might be in excess of what the board would want to add just all in, we did work with the steering committee, with the voices at the table, to really create an opportunity to prioritize those enhancements. And so what you see here are the ranking out of those conversation, and ranking meaning just that they were the highest need, the highest value, the place where both operationally, functionally, the committee, student staff, everyone who had a voice at that table really felt like that would be a place that they would advocate for the strongest. You can see that multi-purpose assembly space that we discussed, and then the courtyard enhancement, which is the storm cells, soil cells. Second, then, is cooling capacity in all the classrooms, specifically existing, and mass timber. So because we went through such a deep bench of each of these, just wanted to bring them back to the foreground in order of the priority that the community and committee have really elevated them. And this is their thoughts, not the design team carrying that prioritization, but really coming from your community of learners. So this is that multi-purpose assembly space, that option one that was discussed, the opportunity to have it really finish and close the courtyard from a securing the campus perspective. It's right at the front door, so community can easily access. It expands the venue capacity. It provides the multi-purpose component, easily adjacent to administration. It could be from professional development. It's directly connected to the drama space, allowing that to become back of house during performances. It allows operationally drama and choir to be uninterrupted if you've got a show that's running over multiple weekends. And so of the two options, if you remember, there was two options we were looking at. This was the highest value that the community wanted to raise to the top, this multi-purpose assembly space at the front door. The courtyard system was a little bit further in our conversation, so you might remember that one. I won't go into as much detail here, but this is adding the storm cells to allow us to really create an operational maintenance efficiency, a student-centered space where students can be as students do and don't need to be restricted from certain areas, and then creates a healthier environment to boot. The partial cooling in all classrooms for bringing the temperature to less than 80 degrees and ensuring the air circulation, et cetera, is enhanced within those spaces. And then the building structural system option to add mass timber. The next steps is really where we come to as we think about what is next for the community. We also want to just take a moment to bring back up the project timeline, to say that the work that's been done to date has been done so that you can look at an occupancy date should the board put together a proposal for a bond for community um, in April of 2025 that would have you moving into construction in 2028. That this phase, the concept design, has been invaluable for the co-designing process to ensure that we're bringing to you now the option that has the most broad support. Since the last time we talked, where you were asking us to make sure we went back to more voices, we've taken the concept design that you saw today back to the students, to the staff, to the neighboring, especially the HOA from the lakes, and the support for this option is really both broad and excited. So this current phase that we're wrapping up now with this presentation really sets the groundwork and the framework for the potential funding measure that you're considering, brings forward the cost and the scope of those projects, as well as opportunities for those functional and need enhancements that were discussed, really sets the building program size, and then works on the massing that we would be ready to move forward to should the board elect to move forward with the funding measure and should the community be in support. So just from all of the community members that have come together to create this vision for your consideration, we would love to say thank you and appreciate your thoughtful consideration of the proposal.